All right, everybody, welcome to the third episode of the NPStudents podcast, and this is really exciting today because this is a conversation that is relevant to everybody listening, however it is that they found the podcast, which I'm just excited about. It doesn't really matter where you are in life, what you believe about the world. Our thoughts impact every single one of us in a significant way. So this is going to be really cool. Before we kind of recap the episodes from this past week and what we jump into, I just want to introduce our group here today because for the second week in a row, we have a basketball player almost as good as Keeney and I.
Yeah, almost. Definitely taller.
Yeah, we had Grant last week and then now Braden this week. Just kidding. Matt and I are terrible. Anyways, so Braden, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
I'm Braden. I'll be going to my senior year at Vista Ridge High School, and I've been a Christian about all my life. And
And you're committed to play next year, right?
I'm not committed, but I've had a lot of offers.
Okay, you've had some offers.
A lot of offers, dude.
Yeah,
a lot of offers.
A lot of offers. That's exciting. Yeah, I don't know where all my offers went. They got
dude.
lost in the mail.
Probably put my email wrong. It just didn't get to me.
Yeah. I know. I feel that deeply. So. We have Matt in high school.
A couple years removed.
And we have Taylor almost done with high school. You're going to finish
correct.
People finish college early. People don't finish high school early very often.
I'm the only one in my grade.
Wow.
At my school.
Wow. In your entire school, you were the only person graduating
To
a
my
semester
knowledge
early.
and my counselor's knowledge, I'm the only one.
Well, if your counselor doesn't know, that feels like
So,
there's a
yeah.
pretty good chance that's
Yeah.
true.
I go to Liberty Hill.
Yeah.
I love it. Way out in the boondocks.
Wow.
but-
We
Yeah.
both live in Liberty Hill.
Yeah, we do.
That is something that we share. Yeah, and it does kind of feel like once you get out there, you're in a slightly different world.
It is a different world.
You know,
Yeah.
you go to downtown Austin and then you go to Liberty Hill and you're like, I
Completely
feel like I
different.
just went to two different countries.
Yeah, they're polar opposites.
Yeah, it's wild. It's calm out there though.
Yeah.
I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining in for our conversation today. And basically, what we talked about in our episodes this past week is we talked about thinking about your thoughts, which you almost have to like pause to like think about that for a second. You have to think about your thoughts, which means, we have so many influences in our head every single day that determine what we do. And a lot of times we don't give them any attention. We don't capture the negative thoughts. We don't capture the positive thoughts. We don't think about like, is that even true? How I'm feeling right now. We just kind of exist throughout our days. So a lot of interesting research. Granted, I don't really know how this is tracked, because it's kind of hard. But apparently you have like 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day, which I don't know if anybody's like real good at math on that. If you're up for like, 16 hours in a day, if you sleep 8 hours a night, like that's thousands of thoughts every hour. I mean, that's crazy, right? And then apparently about 80% of those are negative. So we have a lot of negative thoughts about the world, people, and a lot of negative thoughts about ourselves. And we talked in this episode, actually, your sister was talking in this episode, which was cool. She did a phenomenal job. That was so good.
Yeah.
She talked about how our thoughts determine our actions, right? Because there's a path that whatever we're thinking about, our thoughts is really what we end up acting on. And our actions determine the reality that we experience. And so a lot of the world around us, our relationships, our faith, our goals, all of that kind of starts with a simple idea or a thought that we let live in our head and repeat itself, et cetera. So this is really where we want the battleground for a lot of the things in life that we want to accomplish, habits we would want to change. It really starts in this arena. So I'm really excited to dive in to a lot of this. I think one of the simple grids that we might shape our time a little bit, and I just want to hear what this is kind of like for each of you. At North Point, we talk about these things called the 5 voices, which is really just a tool to say that there are 5 voices that influence all of us. 5 voices that you're going to see in life, 5 voices that you're going to see in Scripture, 5 voices you're going to hear from your friends and culture, etc. And I think what's helpful about this tool is to recognize that not every thought you have in your head is true. And that's a really big deal, because you might have a negative thought about yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, and the realization even that isn't a true thought, and maybe that didn't even originate with you, and it maybe didn't originate from God, it originated from friend or social media or, something, an insecurity, whatever it may be. Those things are really, really helpful. And so that's why the grid is great. And generally speaking, 3 of the voices are not true voices. Like 3 of the voices are ones that we would want to kind of think about right? Think about your thoughts. We would want to give attention to and try to capture them. And then 2 of them are good voices. Like 2 of them are true voices. We want to figure out, how can I hear more of these voices every single day? How can I move that ratio from like 80% negative and untrue and more into the positive and true direction? So I think a really like easy starting point would be, one of the voices is the voice of the world. And I don't mean that the world is all bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the voice that basically is a voice of comparison. It's a voice that says, keep up. It's a voice that says, your value and worth is based on what you do, how you look, what the scale says, what your grades are, if you're on varsity or not, what college you're going to go to. It's this voice of, looking on social media and seeing everybody else's highlight reel and then feeling like you're not enough about yourself. So you want to stay busy, you want to, strive, and you want to find your value and worth and a lot of recognition of people, right? And that is just something that, again, we kind of started the podcast this way. No matter how you see the world, no matter what you believe, everybody experiences those. So, Braden, I think it'd just be fun to start with you, because I know that you are an athlete, and so you've experienced being on the floor in important games with 1,000 people in the room, screaming your name for or against you, etc. When you hear the voice of the world, like, what are some of the voices maybe in that category that you experience or that are really big or common for you?
I think like it's so easy for me to get in my head. Like if I miss like my first 3 or 4 shots, I'm like, man, I'm terrible. Like I just am a bad basketball player. Like, and those things aren't true. Like you could just have a bad game, but it's so easy for like the world or the enemy to just come at you and just say like, man, you are terrible. He's trying to tear you down and stuff like that. Yep. And even in this playoff series, like Paul George, like he's had like 3 bad games, and he's one of the best players, one of the best shooters in the league.
Yep.
But he even said that he just was not in the right place going into the bubble and all that stuff. And then he had to have a mentor, like a coach, come and tell him, like, man, you are good, and this is all just going to pass. And then the next 2 games, he dropped like 30 points. And it's all about like in your thoughts, because if the enemy's just going to attack you, you got to know like, man, these aren't true, and you just got to overcome it.
Right.
And that's really just what I do.
I do want to stick on you for a second there, but I love that Paul George example you just brought up, because that's somebody who's, one of the best in the world, one of the best in the planet, really. Once you're into the NBA, anybody in the NBA is best in the world at that level. And this is a guy who's had success even at that level, and then, publicly says like, hey, I've been in my head. Like, I'm having voices get to me. Like, hey, the battleground is like between my ears right now. Like, that's crazy. It's cool for him to be vulnerable. I know Kevin Love like won an ESPY. He like just won an award because of his, being real about the anxieties he faces and the depression he's fought through. Another, really successful NBA player, if you haven't heard of him before. But it's cool to see. I think there's a little bit of a change in culture, like a willingness to just talk about it. Which is, one of the first steps in all this. So that's one that you hear. I like one of the things you said too. You said like, I miss a couple shots and it's like, I'm bad, right? Yeah. So a lot of times our performance goes straight to our identity. Yeah. Not like, oh, I missed the shot, which is really all that happened. But it's like, no, I am bad. Like, I am a failure. I didn't work hard enough. I didn't prepare hard. I don't have enough skill. Like, I'm bad. I think that's so interesting. What would you say are things that are helpful for you when you're like, those thoughts get big or those anxieties get big, or you're like, man, I suck? Like, what's helpful for you to get out of that headspace?
I know that it's like basketball's a really fast game, but usually when like a free throw's happening or a timeout, I literally like just talk to God. I pray, and I'm like, these thoughts aren't real. These aren't like, they're just trying to mess with me and all that stuff. And I just pray, would you just like tear down the lies and help me through this game. And sometimes, I have a good game after that. Like the second half, I'll come out and make 4 or 5 threes, but sometimes it doesn't work, and like I'll have a bad game, but I know that it's all for a purpose and that it ends up being better the next day.
Wow, that's cool. I love that insight. It's cool for me, like, watching you. I remember the first time I saw you play, because I've known your dad for a long time. And then when I went and saw you play one time, everybody had said you were a good basketball player. I just hadn't seen you play yet. And I was like, dude, he's awesome. Like, and it's hard when you have some success in an area. It's hard for, now people do sometimes start to know you that way. Like, oh yeah, that's Braden. Like, he's an awesome basketball player at Vista. He's probably going to go play in college. And that's a new identity we can, start to take on. How do you keep the two separate? Like, how do you say like, man, being a basketball player is not like all that I am. That's not like all of me. There's more to me. Like, how do you kind of keep those, distinguished in your head?
I try not to even think about that stuff, like me, the basketball player, because like when I was little, that's all I wanted to be in high school. I just wanted to be the basketball player that everybody knew.
Yeah.
But once you're like the basketball player, you just don't want, like, I don't really want that. Like, I just want people to know me as like a Christian and someone that they can come to, and like their thoughts are like overwhelming and stuff like that. Like, I don't really want Braden, the basketball player, to be an identity of me.
Yeah.
I just want that to be someone that, like, something I do, not something I am. Really.
Yeah. Dude, that's incredible.
Awesome.
And that's unique. I don't know what the percentages would be, but I don't think like a lot of people would say like, that's how I'm trying to view the world, especially like young, and what's kind of odd about it is it can almost be harder when you've had success to not, find it, when you're like, okay, I am being recognized for like my skills in this area. Now I have to fight almost like twice as hard to not be defined by it, or there's a pressure to keep it up. I know Matt and I in like communicating world talk about this all the time. It's almost like sometimes when we started speaking, those days might almost be easier than it is today, because now there's like an expectation, you know what I mean? Now there's like, okay, people are coming and saying, and there's an expectation in terms of what you're going to deliver when you're on stage. It's the same thing for you. Like, they've seen you play well, so now you go have a bad game and like people are disappointed. Yes. Whereas like before, they wouldn't, if they had no expectations, people don't know who Braden is, it's like, okay, whatever. You go and you have a consistent, amount of success, and now it's like, you feel a pressure to keep that up, and you can find your identity in that too.
And we're also our harshest critics. Like, I know, after a bad, basketball game or a bad, what we think is a bad message, it's just like our first moment off stage is like, I always come to you, I'm like, hey, how was your message? And you just give me this look like,
I do that all the time.
And you could have dropped 25, and like it could have it could have been like on the scoreboard like a great game, but then I can look to you and be like, hey dude, how's your game? But it's just like we're our biggest critics, and so that thoughts in our heads after we perform or do something or chase something and come off of that, like it really drives our actions and our mood for the rest of the day, and it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, I think sports, that's such an interesting world, because I'm trying to think if there's one that isn't. I feel like every sport is this way, where like a good game in any sport is like you failed a small percentage of the time, and it's like, but you're going to fail. Like in basketball, you're like, okay, I shot 60% today, so I missed 40% of my shots, but that was a great game. And then baseball, it's even lower. It's like, okay, I went 1 for 3. Well, batting 300 is pretty solid batting average, but that means 2 times you didn't get a hit. And so it just is like really, there's this pressure, this, to kind of perform and keep those numbers up, and it's really easy to get wrapped up in it. Taylor, what about for you? If we're say, voice of the world comparison, whatever triggers that for you, if it's something at school, if it's social media, what would you say the voice of the world, sounds like for you when it's really loud?
Yeah, I think right now, social media is a big aspect of that, because I think like as a girl, not that it's just a girl thing, but I think it heightens as a girl that like you see someone else's post, or you see their highlight reel, because why post the negative things or the bad things? And I just think, I don't know, it's very easy to see things like that and be like, well, their life is amazing. Like, what is wrong with me? And I don't know. I think when I was younger, it was more dance for me, because like it's a very competitive environment. If you can't dance, or if you can't hit a certain like choreography point, like whatever, like you get pulled like instantly. And like all of the practice and all the dedication like into learning that routine, it could just automatically like get taken away from you. And so I think like back when I did drill team in the last 2 years, like that was really a big thing for me, is like the voice of your directors and the voices of the girls around you on the team who are constantly like fighting for the only like 12 or 15 positions in that dance. Like, I don't know. Now, not that I don't dance, that's not as much of a like thing for me, but I don't know. I think it's hard. There's a lot that's competing for your time and your thoughts, and having to like navigate that and decide what's true is complicated, but it's important.
Yep. That's awesome. I like that you kind of led with the social media thing too, because I think it's just, it's getting harder and harder to even like differentiate social media from our real lives. Like in a world where everything is digital now, there's so many platforms now, and you subconsciously know that people are posting their best stuff, but it doesn't seem to matter. I don't know how often people get on Instagram and get off and you're like, I feel better about myself now.
Yeah.
You know, like you were kind of mentally drained for a while and comparing yourself for a while. And even though, you know, like, gosh, somebody might've been fighting right before, like they took that picture, that couple looks so cute in the picture. And why isn't my relationship that way? Or why am I not that fit? Or why am I not that good of an athlete? Or why, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Even something mindless like TikTok now, you're like, it could be, why am I not that funny? Or why, how did they go viral? Or how did, you know, there's just so much to compare ourselves to that. I think historically speaking, you could say like that is unique, like to our generation, this kind of time. You know, you just, you know, hundreds of years ago, and you grow up on a farm, and you can't like pull out your iPhone and see yourself. And, well, how are all the other farmers doing? You know what I mean? You're like, it's just a little bit of a different scenario right now that we're growing up in that really is big, and I think makes that voice of the world one, you know, a whole lot louder right now. Another one that I just really want to camp on because it's so relevant and it's so overpowering. What we call it is the voice of the enemy, you know. And so I think if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this today, first of all, I love that because this is designed to be helpful to everybody, kind of however it is that they came across this content. But I still think this is just as relevant of a voice for everybody because this is the negative voice, the voice of shame that tells us that we're not enough. And almost like, you know, I kind of like how we started with, I had a bad shot, now I suck. You know, it's like one voice can kind of lead to the other sometimes or be a pathway to another voice. But this is all of the stuff that you hear, that you're not enough, you don't have what it takes, you know, you're a failure, you're a disappointment. It's a lot of identity statements that is trying to take you out of your core identity, your core value, where you're making a difference in the world, you're loving people well, and we just kind of get in this place of like, you know, I don't have what it takes, and we get, you know, down this path of really self-destructive behaviors. But this voice is so loud sometimes, you know, so loud depending on the circumstances or where we're at, or if we're not capturing it, if we're not, you know, thinking about this thought in this voice. It's a really big one. If you are a Christian, you know, it's not something that like we tend to lead with, because I'm not trying to make it too weird or anything, but we absolutely do believe that we have an enemy. We believe he's real, and just as much as God is trying to get our attention, he's trying to get our attention too. And so, you know, for us, you know, I think sometimes it's helpful to remember that if you're a follower of Christ, there is this enemy. His name's Satan. And, you know, you see Jesus and him interact in the New Testament. You see him trying to put false thoughts in Jesus's head. And the reason I think that's like helpful to remember and isn't something we should just, you know, avoid all the time or not talk about is because to some degree, we're designed to know who our enemy is. And when we forget that, we make our enemy each other. And now all of a sudden, like, we have a whole bunch of enemies based on your political party, based on what school you go to, based on what sport you play, based on what clique you're a part of, you know. And we're never meant to be enemies with one another. We're meant to remember, like, who this enemy is. And so I think it's helpful to be aware, not get, like, undue attention to, but be aware of the fact that we have an enemy that lies to us and tells us untrue things. So I'll lead with this one because, you know, this is a voice I just hear a lot. Some of that is even my personality. You know, we've talked a little bit on the Enneagram on this podcast already, but I'm a 3, which is a performer, an achiever. And so whenever I'm not performing well, like, the voice of the enemy is really loud. But, you know, the message prep process is an example for me where I just hear this constantly. And I mean, it is like almost tangible of nobody wants to hear you. That's so boring. That's so weird. Like, why would you ever say that? You're so awkward. I mean, like, I hear all of that. And I've been, you know, had the opportunity to communicate here at North Point almost like 10 years now, you know, and I'm like, so 10 years into that process. And I don't know that I've ever prepared for a message and not heard like some amount of that. And sometimes it's louder than others, etc. I can feel it on stage, you know, like I'm in the room and somebody's on their phone and it's like they hate you, they're bored, you know, whatever. And, you know, somebody gets up and walks out of the auditorium and, you know, really they're like just taking their crying baby out of the room, or they have to pee, you know, or whatever it is. But I'm like, they hate you and they're never coming back to North Point and it's all your fault, you know. And those voices just can get really, really loud. And it's kind of wild. And I think it's interesting, you know, Matt and I, you and I have talked about this. Even being in the church world role, you know, we think, well, our failures or our mistakes or our perfections, that should keep us out of leadership. Like, who are we to serve at North Point? Like, who are we to serve at a church? Because, you know, we know all of our imperfections and we know all of our failures. And Satan would say, like, hey, you know, the voice of the enemy would say, like, you're defined by that. You know, like, you are your mistakes. You are you know, you're not worthy to, like, be here. Like, you shouldn't be serving and engaging. And so this is a voice that, you know, I hear just constantly and can hit at my work. It can hit when I'm communicating. It can hit in my relationships. It can hit with Emily. I can hear that I'm not a good enough husband. It can be in my friendships that I'm a terrible friend. I mean, just about any area of life that's important to me, I hear this voice pretty loud. And so I'm curious. So that's why I love this podcast, and that we have high school students on each time to be like, what is this like, for your world? So either one of you, could lead this one. But when you hear like, I'm not enough, is there an area where you hear this a lot? Is there, a place in life? Is there a certain version of this voice that's really loud for you guys? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I think when I start a new task or I have a new responsibility like added to my plate, I automatically, like, when I hit a wall or the first bump in the road, I'm like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, why would someone entrust me with it? Or I'm not good enough to like continue with this. And I think like starting school online was a big thing for me like this year, and I kind of hit this bump because it was new and it was foreign, and like I enjoy going to school, and like I enjoy being around people, and I learn better in a classroom environment. So like the first bump, like the first day of school is like, this is it, like that's it, I can't learn online, like I'm gonna fail, I'm a horrible student, like, and I just like really hit this wall of nothing is gonna like work out the way I planned. And I don't know, it's sort of like this like control thing for me where I like to know what's happening. I like to know what to expect. Like, I don't like new and foreign things. And so like when I start new things, I kind of have this like chip on my shoulder. It's like, you're just not going to do as well as you think you're going to do. And I think that's a huge area in my life for me when I like get into something, because I doubt myself, and
Yep.
I need to stop that.
And then it's normal though, the
Yeah.
exact, like everything you just said, that's what's, I think, even hopefully helpful touch point of this podcast is it's like everybody experiences what you just talked about.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it any easier on you individually, but it's something that's like, gosh, everybody thinks that, everybody goes through that.
I think for me, like mine's not really like an example of like basketball or like social media. It's really just like my walk with Christ. Like mine is like, I make mistakes all the time, and the enemy will always come at me, but like, how could Jesus ever forgive you for that? Like, how could he ever like want to forgive you for that? Like, you're terrible. I can't believe you ever did that. And it just like, that really hits hard for me, and it's always sticks in my head. And I pray about it, but it's just always there, and it hurts so much. And like, I'll try to go like hang out with my friends, just get my mind off it. But then the enemy will come out and be like, how could you enjoy life when you just did that? And like, how could you enjoy this moment and all that stuff? And it's just really hard for me to overcome, but I still pray about it and everything. Like, it gets better, but it's always there, like every time. And then I'll make another mistake. And then, cause we're all sinners, and I end up just in my head all the time. And it just really like, it just makes you not want to enjoy the little things, but Jesus is always calling me back to be like, hey, I'll pick you up. I mean, I forgive you. And it's just, I still need to remember the truth of like what Jesus says about me and all that stuff.
Wow. Yeah, I love, that's the most grounding thing. I think, I'm biased, but I think that you could possibly go to is just, what does Jesus say about you? What is true? And it's so interesting that, the gospel is not something that you just like hear one time and that's it. This is like a continual reminder that sustains us for the rest of our life. Like, oh yeah, my identity isn't in my failures. Like, oh yeah, that mistake is not who I am. Like, I am who Christ says I am because he died for me. That's so powerful, what you're sharing right there.
Yeah, and even there's a verse in the New Testament, Peter actually writes this, that actually just talks about how loud that voice of the enemy actually is. It's 1 Peter 5:8-9. It says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings." So what I love about that is that, the devil like walks around just like a lion, like he's loud. So everything that you guys were just saying in terms of like, I hear this all the time. It's in my head all the time, regardless of what we do or what we see. It's just in our head all the time. It's supposed to be loud. And I think you were even sharing this in a message a couple months ago that just stuck with me. It's like, we have a God that whispers to us. He can whisper to us if we actually allow him to. And so, of course, like the voice of the enemy is going to be very, very loud. But when we allow God in, like you were saying, and pray about it and take that to Jesus, that's when we can really hear God's whisper and his voice well. So I thought that was amazing.
Dang. Yeah, I agree that that's like just strong imagery, to say like how aggressive those voices, how overpowering, those can be. Let's see, for the sake of kind of time here, so the third one I'll just summarize, and then we'll just, jump in some of the positive ones. The third one is what we call the voice of the flesh, and that can be kind of a weird word because, it's not really a word you use a lot. I don't think. I personally don't. But what that voice is, though, is actually a very straightforward voice, and it's kind of just like the do what feels good voice. And I don't even know that we all, need a lot of examples to just know what that is like. It's like whatever just feels good in the moment. Don't worry about the long-term consequence. Don't worry about the long-term game. Just do it. And so this can be, whatever. It can be drugs. It can be alcohol. It can be sex. It can be, whatever is going to make me physically feel good in this moment. And I'm just not going to think about like the big picture of this. It can even just be a lazy voice. Like I'm just going to stay in bed. I'm not going to do my homework. I'm not going to work hard. I'm not going to practice because this is just easier. It's this very like simple yet powerful voice that is another one that is really active a lot. Is it really that big of a deal? Will anybody actually know? Like, will anybody actually care? And it's a really powerful one too. But then you have two positive voices, two true voices. One of those is what we call the voice of your soul. And so this is the voice that is when you are doing or engaged in what you were made for, like what you were designed to do. Like God's like, this is why I've put you on this earth. And we have these special moments where things align in the right way. And it's like, gosh, I was created for this. Like this is a moment where like the anxiety is free, the fear is gone, like the guilt and the shame is not here in this moment. And like, this is really what I was made for. Does anything hit your guys' head when you think of like when that voice is loud? Is there an area of your life when like, gosh, when I do this, or when I'm with this person, when I'm serving in this way, like when I'm doing this, I'm like, this is what God made me for. This is so cool.
I think it actually happened to me one time. The very first meeting we had in the foyer, I was thinking about like, it's crazy how Jackson Archer, he invited me to North Point, and how I walked in and didn't know like anybody. I knew like 3 people, and now I'm sitting here on a podcast for Inside Out, and it's just crazy, and it just made me feel good in that moment. When we were in that meeting, I was just like, I'm so thankful for like all that God's put, like His plan for me throughout this whole process, and it's just been like that was just like all the shame and guilt just went away, and it just made me feel better in my thoughts, and it really made my day right there, just like knowing that. Not like I didn't know a single person to now being a leader, and it's just really cool to know how He transformed me to that.
I love the word like grateful I think grateful is a very common emotion when like this voice is loud, because it's not like, wow, I'm so cool, I did this. The voice is like, wow, look, in spite of my past and my story and who I am, like look what God allows me to be a part of. Like this is so cool. I love that. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Like you're using your voice and your influence and your leadership to impact other people's lives that are walking through life just like you are. I think that's an amazing example of that. That's great.
That's awesome, dude. I know. Go for it.
I was just going to say, like, I think that's most prominent, that feeling's most prominent for me when I'm serving with my transit girls, because I've been their small group leader for 4 years now, and I think, like, I've seen a huge transformation in their lives from elementary school to transit. They're now 8th graders, and I just think every time I get to just be on the other side of them and hear them talk to me, and just the, like, emotional growth that they've had, that's so rewarding to me, because I remember them just being babies and just, like, wanting to yell and scream and, like, do nothing. And I don't know. I just, like, it's been a really cool moment for me, like, as a leader, just to be like, I don't know, maybe I've made little deposits in their life over the past 4 years. And it just reminds me that I love what I love that I get to hang out with them, and I love being around them. And it's one of the most rewarding. It's hard, but it's one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah. Yeah, for those of you listening on Apple or Spotify and not watching, Matt gave a legit fist pump when you said that. And you saw like the reaction.
Yeah, I know for me personally, it's through most of my opportunities here at North Point where I really feel the voice of the soul is the loudest. I know for me personally, and I know this is a long story, so I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible, but I've been going to Kenya, part of our Mosaic trip, for the last 4 years, and sad that we can't go this year. But my first year there, I was heading into my senior year, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was the only student on the trip. I was with 3 adults I didn't know at all. And I had a lot of voices of like, why am I really doing this? Like, is it, for whatever. I had no idea why I was really going, but I was there on the plane and it was too late to turn back. So I was like, here we go. And throughout the trip, I was trying to recognize like why I really wanted to be there. And then each trip we go through home visits, and we get to meet the people of the community, the disenfranchised community, people who have had conditions where it's hard for them to work, hard for them to get food, people who have special needs. We get to meet with each of those people, pray for those people and their families, and provide them a month's worth of food. And so my first trip there was something wrong with our transportation, because that happens every single trip in Kenya. Something happens where they're not able to pick us up and all that stuff. But something happened with our transportation, and we were 4 hours late, and we were supposed to hit a couple different houses. And those houses that we were supposed to go to, those people gathered up and actually walked to us, which I thought was really cool. I mean, walked 4 miles to come pray with us and meet us and all that stuff. What made it really cool for me, and where I heard the voice of the soul the most, is there was one old lady, anywhere between 75 to 85 years old. She was walking there, and she had about a hole on her leg, about the hole of a small soccer ball, if you will, like deflated soccer ball, and it was on her leg, and she had it wrapped up, and we got to take a look at it, and we were like, hey, how long has that been on your leg? And she said close to 35 years. And in that moment, I was like, there is a reason why I'm here, like to see that faith from another person on halfway across the world, to walk 4 miles to just pray with us, and just on a leg that has been hurt, where she probably can't even feel her toes anymore, to walk with us. And I heard the voice of the soul saying, there's a reason you're here. There's a reason why you need to be back. There's a reason why you need to share this faith with people back home. And I don't know. I've had that experience in Kenya, and I've had it every single experience when someone just thanks me for a message that I give or anything like that. Meanwhile, my own thoughts are like, that was the worst thing you could have ever said on stage or anything like that. But I hear the voice of the soul the loudest when I get to do things I love for the people I love. And so that's just kind of where it's the loudest.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing a little bit of a consistent trend of connection here, connecting with people, serving people, loving people, making an impact in people's lives. And it does seem that, God has designed us for that, if you will. Because that's what the moments of connection come to my mind. And they can be really simple moments. Like, there are times where it's a walk with Emily, and we're just talking about the day, and, sun is setting, and you're like, gosh, I was made for a moment, like this. Or then it's times, at North Point, when we're at Inside Outs, or we're in a small group, or we're just having a conversation with somebody before or after, and it's like you're getting to connect with somebody. I think those are beautiful moments. And then I would put, just moments where I get to connect with God in that category too. Sometimes it's just very early in the morning, and nobody else is in the room, and it's just, I'm just with him, and there's these moments of connection to be like, gosh, the chaos of the world fades away a little bit, and this is what I'm made for. So I think those are fascinating. I think there's something in us. Even as you guys are describing that, it's like my hope goes up, my positivity goes up. Mm-hmm. There's something in that that I long for, and I think people can hear that listening too. And then the last one is the voice of God, which he says lots of things about us, but that is a true voice, and that is the voice that really we are longing for in all of our relationships and all of our striving and all of our working and all of our dreams, because it's just the voice that says you are loved. It's the voice that says you are mine. You belong to me. You are enough as you are. I know you intimately. We have that fear so often in our relationships, like, gosh, if people really knew me or knew this secret or knew how I am, at this time of day or whatever, then they wouldn't like me. It's like God knows all of that and everything you've ever done and loves you as you are. He's the one who says, I have plans for you. He's the one who sent his son for us, that we are forgiven. And so there's a lot of ways that God speaks to us and a lot of things he says to us as you look throughout scripture, but his is the voice that we're always longing to hear the loudest. And so that's the one that we're trying to replace essentially, like all the other voices with, so it's the one to contrast when I hear I'm not enough. Well, what does God say about that? Is that God's voice? Is that what God is really saying? And so I want to get practical, just, kind of in our last couple minutes of how we hear those last two a little more. And we have a couple verses here that we're looking at ahead of time. One of those is Romans 12:2, which says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So he says there is a transformation in our lives that starts with our mind. That's exactly what we're talking about. And I love this because this is literature that is 2,000 years old. And here we are today with all this new science that is coming and how our brains rewire and how habits work in our brain and how you can literally form new pathways in your brain. And yet 2,000 years ago, Paul is like, hey, life change starts in your mind, and it starts with what you think about, and it starts seeing yourself and seeing God in a different way. So you literally have like a new mind, and that is what the science says today. It's like you can have a new brain because new pathways are formed. It's kind of wild. But he says then you'll be able to know what God's will is. People talk about it all the time, like, how do I hear from God? Or how do I know what God wants? Well, this renewing of your mind, seeing him differently, seeing you differently, will allow you to see him and know what he wills for us. And the other verse that we had talked about was in Philippians. And Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And so again, I mean, it's kind of interesting because in social media world, there's some self-help and there's some positivity things and there's all this, but there is a degree to which God says, like, do that. Like focus on, think about the things, remember the things that are good, and find a way to, center yourself around those things. Do you guys have any way that works for you that you practically do this, or when it's going well, to be like, gosh, this is helpful to me to remember exactly what he says, what's excellent, what's praiseworthy. This is how I think about the positive things in my life. How does that work out for you guys?
I think I like to read Psalms. Psalms is like full of just really, I don't know, helpful, encouraging, just like pieces of like God loves you. It's like, it's very descriptive. It's very, I don't know. It just, when I read Psalms, it kind of like sets the tone in my mind that like he loves me and like I'm incredible. And like, despite all the things that like kind of compete for my attention in my mind, like there is a God out there who like absolutely without a doubt loves me. And I think like Psalms is a really like lighthearted, like encouraging like piece of scripture to just read and be like, no, like he cares about you. I don't know. Yeah. I do that and I enjoy it. And it's a good reminder for me.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I like reading like the stories in like the Old Testament. And one that I really like is when he gets his people out of slavery, and it took him it took 40 years. And it's just like, in my life, I'm in a storm right now where it just feels like I can't hear God, and it just feels like I'm lonely. Yeah. But I know that he's there, and I know he's coming, and it might take like a couple of months or years or anything.
Hopefully not 400 for you,
but
for real.
It took him that long but he had a plan from the start from it. And I know that even though in the middle of my storm, I know that he's going to pick me up and he's going to walk me out of it, and everything's just going to be okay.
Yeah. Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit like just surrounding yourself with things, people, tools that are going to point you back to what's true, right? Like, in other words, it's not something you necessarily just do on your own with effort, but, time with God, reading what is true points you back to what is true. I think it's great. I think people in your life, I mean, whether that's our small group leaders, mentors in our life, I have a lot of people in my life that will, ground me when I'm starting to get off my axis and I'm starting to think, things that are untrue, and they're just like, hey, like, whose voice is that? Where does that come from? Which I think is so incredibly practical.
Yeah, one of the things that just helps me is just breathing in the morning. I think a lot of our first routines when we wake up is like, okay, let's refresh all of our social media. Let's start our day that way. And then we go get hit with school, and then we go get hit with all these other things, chores, responsibilities. And then this season, it's just stressful and overwhelming and all that stuff. I like to, after my time with God each morning, just do a breathing exercise that, I don't know if you taught me this or Jeremy Edelin taught me. Somebody taught me this, but it was awesome. Yeah. But before I just start my day, I like to breathe in through the nose and Holy Spirit, God in, Matt out. Holy Spirit, God in, Matt out. And not saying like removing my identity from who I am really, but just filling my thoughts, filling my breath with what God has for me is a great way to just slow, right? There's a verse in Proverbs saying, be still and know that I am God. And if we could just be still in the morning and know that God is with us step by step of the day, it can help us shift our thoughts of what Paul was talking about in Philippians, of thinking of what is true, what is right, what is noble. Like, that helps us just slow down before we see the rush of the world, trying to compare ourselves to everybody we see on social media and all that stuff. When we breathe in God, we let ourselves go, we let our thoughts go. That will help slow down the rest of our day.
Mm. Yep. There's something really weird about how the physical body is linked with our spiritual walk, our emotions. I mean, and it's like exactly that, the breathing, the grounding, and the saying like, hey God, I I need you. Like I surrender myself to you. That process of what that you just talked about, like it is a weirdly powerful thing when you like start doing it and exploring it. So I love that. I want to maybe leave people just this practical tool because I literally use this like every day. I don't know that other people will or what, but the question of whose voice is that is such a powerful question because it reminds me that not every voice is true. So when I'm going down a negative spiral, whether I'm thinking negative things about myself or somebody else or God or life or scenario or circumstances, when I ask the question, whose voice is that? It's very clarifying the more and more you ask it. You know, you look in the mirror, you don't like what you see, like whose voice is that? I don't have enough. I don't have what it takes. Whose voice is that? Like this is going to fail. This is going to be terrible. Whose voice is that? Because God's voice is pretty clear throughout Scripture. It's one of love and it's never one of fear. So whenever I'm afraid, I know that's not God's voice. I know that's not him like in my head, like causing me to be afraid. You know, that's something, somebody else, some other influence. And so capturing that, to me, all of a sudden, maybe they don't go away, but a lot of the negative voices like just lose a lot of their power as soon as I'm able to recognize that's just not true. And so I kind of want to leave with that question. Is there anything else that you guys would want to add to this conversation before we wrap that, you know, I haven't hit or forgot or anything about?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't know of anything.
Cool. I would just say, I don't want to do a mini sermon here at the end or anything, but I do think whether, you know, you are in your room right now, you're in your car, you're walking, you're working out, like whatever it is, I just think everybody like listening needs to know that there are voices that are true about you. This is a chaotic season. This is a difficult time. This is an uncertain time for a lot of us, but it is true. If you're listening to this, you are loved. I mean, you really are. You need to know that you are enough. You need to know that you are made in the image of God, which that's crazy. Whether you believe in God or not, like just hearing that phrase that you could be made in the likeness and the image of the God of the universe, that he knows you, that he cares about you, that he has plans for you. Like that is incredible, that you're made with purpose, that there's meaning and there's value in your life, that you're not made on your worst mistake. You're not defined by your bad habit. Those things aren't true of you. That there is a way forward where things can change in the future as you walk in this relationship with him. I think so many of those things, I don't know which one of those you need to hear, but there are so many things that are just absolutely fundamentally true about you. And our hope is, you know, some of this conversation today that we're able to continue to be recentered around those things. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, all three of you, for your time and hanging and having this conversation today. And we are really excited for what's coming next.